Hello everybody, welcome back to Points and Miles 101, a 10-part crash course series to help you better understand the basics of the Points and Miles game. We have finally made it to episode 10, the last video of the series. If you've made it here all the way from the start, I truly hope that you've been finding this series insightful and that you're learning a lot about this crazy game that we call Points and Miles. Today we're going to be piggybacking off of our last video talking about redeeming our points, but this time talking specifically about redeeming our points for hotel stays. Now, this side of the coin is not nearly as convoluted because we only have 4 programs that we're working with, but that's not to say that this doesn't hold equal importance. After all, lodging does usually end up becoming the most expensive part about traveling, so learning how to use your points to offset these costs does have the ability to make or break your budget. So let's dive right in. First, let's touch again on some concepts that we talked about during the airline redemption video that are still going to be applicable for hotels. The cents per point calculation, or taking the price of the hotel stay and dividing it by the cost of the stay in points, is still going to be the same here to determine what kind of value you're getting out of your redemption. I'd recommend taking a look at the beginning of episode 9 if you haven't already to better understand this concept in greater detail. And similar to the fuel surcharges that we talked about with the airlines, some of these hotel groups do have resort fees on some properties that you have to take into account when you're running these calculations. We'll talk more in depth on who charges those later in this video. In regards to the cents per point calculation, the value buckets that determine how good a redemption value is for hotels are a little bit different based on the average numbers that we see in the market. When looking at Marriott, Hilton, or IHG, all 3 of these programs price their rewards dynamically, which means you'll see somewhat similar redemption values across all 3 of these programs. Anything under 0.5 cents per point should be a hard stop, as there's just too much out there to settle for something that low. 0.8 is about the average here, so between 0.5 and 0.8 I would consider to be fair, while anything between 0.8 and 1.0 to be good. Anything over 1.0 with these programs is a great redemption and is something I will always take myself. For Hyatt though, their value buckets are going to be different because they are the only program that still uses an award chart, which we'll talk more about in a second. But because of this, their cents per point calculations will be a bit inflated compared to the other 3 programs. So when looking specifically at your Hyatt redemptions, 1.7 is going to be our new floor. 2.0 is going to be our average here, so anything between 1.7 and 2 would be a fine redemption, while anything between 2 and 2.5 would be considered good. Anything above 2.5 is a great redemption, and you may be surprised to find out how many Hyatt redemptions easily eclipse that mark. We'll show some examples of that a bit later. Now, when it comes to redeeming your points for hotel stays, we have a much simpler landscape compared to that of the airlines, but with some similarities. As is the case with the airlines, if you have points stashed with one program, that is a program through which you'll have to redeem those points. And as we discussed earlier in the series, we can also move our transferable points over to these hotel programs instead of just using them for flights. But more simplicity comes in here because there aren't any alliances or partnerships that you have to keep track of. If a specific hotel brand is part of one of these hotel groups, they will show up when you're doing your award searches, obviously subject to availability. And of course, only having to focus on 4 different hotel groups instead of dozens of airlines makes things a little bit easier too. I will pause to make a point here because I know there will be some people in the comments about this. There are a few other hotel groups like Wyndham and Choice Privileges that are also transfer partners of these same credit card issuers. But as I mentioned before, the scope of the series is just going to be focusing on these big 4, as these are the programs that the majority of people are going to be using when it comes to playing the Points and Miles game. Okay, so as I alluded to before, there are only 2 different types of award systems that we have to work through when looking at hotels: dynamic pricing and fixed award charts. Dynamic pricing with hotels is the same concept as dynamic pricing with the airlines. The price of an award stay in points will fluctuate based on demand and availability. Marriott, Hilton, and IHG all use dynamic pricing to price their awards. So the price you're going to pay per night in points with these 3 programs is going to vary and will likely be more expensive during peak travel times and less expensive during non-peak travel times. However, our friends at Hyatt stand alone in that they're the only program that still uses a fixed award chart on all redemptions. And let me tell you, this award chart is like the holy grail of the Points and Miles industry. You can consistently find some unbelievable value when you use your points for Hyatt stays. Let's take a quick peek now on what this chart looks like. So the way it works is Hyatt places every one of its hotels into different categories labeled 1 through 8. As a general rule of thumb, the higher the category, the nicer the hotel. From From there, each category has a fixed price point for peak, standard, and off-peak dates, with peak dates intuitively being the most expensive. This chart on your screen is just for a standard room, and they have different charts with higher prices for club and suite rooms. When we are looking at their all-inclusive resorts like Secrets and Dreams, they have a similar chart set up, but with lettered categories instead of numbers, with the F category resorts being the highest. There is a little bit more nuance to it that we won't dive into yet, but understanding the basic layout of the chart is the most important thing for now. You may have rubbed your eyes a bit when you saw that you could book a room at Hyatt for as little as 3,500 points. But it's true, I am telling you there is some crazy value to be had up and down this whole chart. Take a look at this king room at the Grand Hyatt in the Bahamas, a category 6, which on a random peak date in March is going for over $800 a night that you can get for just 29,000 points. That chalks up to a lovely 2.79 cents per point redemption value. Pretty sweet. Now, before we start to go crazy on finding different redemptions, I did mention earlier that we sometimes have to be aware of resort fees. Similar to the way that fuel surcharges work with the airlines, some hotel redemptions will come with extra fees that you have to pay on top of the points that you're redeeming for the stay. Now, Hilton and Hyatt never charge resort fees on any redemption, which is great, so you never have to worry about this with either of those programs. But both Marriott and IHG will pass these along on redemptions at hotels that have these fees baked into their nightly rates. In the grand scheme of things though, there aren't that many hotels that actually have these resort fees, which is good. Looking at Marriott specifically, only about 4% of their properties in 2023 actually had resort fees, so this is not something that you will encounter all that often. But for those times that you do, you have to keep these fees into account when you're calculating your redemption values. This calculation works the same as when we are looking at flight redemptions with fuel surcharges. We're going to cancel out the resort fee amount on each end of the equation and then take the cash price divided by the points price to get our effective cents per point valuation with the resort fee taken into account. Now on the surface, it seems pretty obvious that Hyatt is the clear winner in all of this. They have a fixed award chart that offers spectacular value, and they never charge resort fees on any redemption. This is true. When given the option, Hyatt will almost always give you the best value for your points. But Hyatt's kryptonite is simply in the lack of properties that they have, especially at the international level. That is when these other three programs are going to come into play, and just because they have dynamic pricing does not mean that you still can't find some good value there too. For example, one perk that all of these programs offer that Hyatt does not is giving you a free night when you redeem your points for certain lengths of stay. Both Marriott and Hilton offer a 5th night free when you redeem for 4 nights, and IHG even does one better and offers a 4th night free when redeeming for 3 nights. So essentially, you can get 5 nights for the price of 4 with Marriott and Hilton, and 4 nights for the price of 3 with IHG. These promotions can really prove to provide a lot of value by boosting what your cents per point redemption values look like. Take a look at this 5-night stay at the Marriott in Vienna. 5 nights will set me back 2,900 euros or just over 3,000 USD. Taking a look at the redemption search, a 5-night total cost in points should be about 353,000. But with the 5th night free, we'd only get charged 286,000 points. So we're looking at a 1.07 cents per point valuation in this scenario, as opposed to what would have otherwise been a 0.87 cents per point valuation. And when we look outside the box of just redemption values, we have to remember that these points can give us access to some amazing experiences that we might not otherwise be able to afford with just cash. Take a look at this overwater villa at the St. Regis in the Maldives that goes for nearly $1,500 per night that you can get for 98,000 points instead. Doing the math on that, you're getting a 1.5 cents per point value on the redemption, which itself is still a great redemption value, but some may point out that, well, it's not as high as the 2.79 cents per point valuation from the Hyatt Bahamas example that we looked at earlier. Is that to say that the St. Regis example is not a good redemption? Of course not. I mean, look at what you're getting with it. And plus, how many people do you know that just have $1,500 per night lying around? I know I don't, but I do know that I can earn those Marriott points. This is where the whole there's no right way to play the game philosophy comes into play. You don't always have to be fixated on getting the highest possible value on your redemption. If there is one thing I want you to take away from this series, is that you can curate this entire thing to fit what you want to get out of it, and only you. If you want to ball out and fly business class and stay at the Ritz, then do it. If you want to see as many corners of the globe by spending as little out of pocket as possible, then go for it. Points and miles make all of it possible. If you've been with me all the way through since the beginning, first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for watching. I genuinely hope that this series has been informative for you and easily consumable, as that is always my ultimate goal. I know how overwhelming and intimidating it can be when you're first starting out in this game, but I do hope that this series can be a reference point for you as you continue to navigate the points and miles waters. Down the line, I will continue to make more detailed videos about a wide variety of points and miles topics, and I also have flight reviews and travel vlogs and a bunch of other stuff already posted on my channel that I will continue to make as well. So if you haven't already, I really would appreciate it if you did subscribe, as I would love to have you around here for the long haul. Anyways, with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching as always, and we'll catch you in the next.